Samantha Bass, and a reminder that we are streaming via YouTube on the SouthX channel, as well as we are being broadcast live on Freedom 106.5 FM. And as we continue our engaging discussions, we definitely want to lean in on fintech and the digital currency. And with me, two experts to cover this particular topic, Mr. Navin Dukaran. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Exim Bank Limited, and alongside this role, he serves as a director and is a member of the Legislative Committee of the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Associations. And before assuming his current position, Mr. Dukaran held key roles in academia and executive leadership. He served as a lecturer and program director for the Executive MBA and Chief Operating Officer at the UE Arthur Lockjack Global School of Business. Welcome, Mr. Dukaran.
Thank you, Samantha.
And also with us is Mr. John Outridge. He is currently the Chief Executive Officer of the Trinidad and Tobago International Financial Center and is responsible for leading the company as it executes its mandate of driving digital financial services adoption across all sectors, so Trinidad and Tobago can become a premier location for fintech-enabled services and maintain its position as the financial hub of the region. We would like to also welcome Mr. John Outridge. Good morning.
Hi, good day.
And thank you for being here as we discuss and lean into fintech and the digital currency. I really wanted to start with looking at maybe some of the perspective findings and insights, just from a nationwide survey that was conducted by Trinidad and Tobago International Financial Center on the financial inclusion.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having us. So we actually started with developing this survey because one of the gaps we realized was we didn't really have a lot of data as what I would say the habits and the usage of persons within Trinidad and Tobago as it relates to using these digital payment services. And, we're talking about simply things like even using your cards. So like, for example, we're here in the Supermarket Association and, one of these sort of insights, because we are basically midway in terms of capturing that data to realize one of the #1 usage of cash in Trinidad and Tobago is to actually buy groceries in the supermarket. And we got that feedback from persons in terms of, when you take out cash, what is the #1 usage for? And it was really to do a lot with on their own personal expenditure. So what we're trying to do is to kind of understand what is driving that behavior, because when you see what's happening in the country now, almost every day you open the papers and you see somebody loses $40,000 in a car or gets robbed outside an establishment for $160,000. So, why are people taking out this amount of cash? And what is the reason? And, and some of the insights we kind of get in is to deal with, certain areas like trust within institutions. I guess when you kind of look what's happening globally and, some of the stories that people are kind of, and the social media plays, I would say, a big role from that, because, some of the conversations we have been having with people, they're referring to when it was the pandemic and in the Canadian government, when the truck drivers refused to take vaccines, and the government shut down their accounts. And these sort of things you might think happen isolated, but those sort of, I would say, topics kind of make their way down into certain populations and they take that in themselves and that informs their own behavior. So we are kind of halfway through, and the idea is once we complete this survey is to really now work with the different stakeholders to develop policies in terms of how do we incentivize the usage for more digital adoption, whether it be for cards, mobile wallets, other areas, because what we're trying to do is, I wouldn't say be a cashless society, but at least definitely be a less cash society. Because when you think about it, it's a number of different positive indicators. It provides security, safety, convenience, but then also for people who transact with cash. And Navin could speak about this point in terms of when you go into a financial institution to get a loan, for example, even in small businesses, you need to have some sort of transaction record or documentation in terms of how you spend. But when you transact in cash, nothing is tracked, so it really kind of helps boost the formal economy. I could pass to Navin to talk about that perspective.
Yes, and definitely, when people have the discussion about cashless society, it comes with a lot of, let's say, some negative thoughts there. So with Exim Bank, how are you supporting this cashless society, and where do you want to take this initiative?
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. Well, you know, John talked about doing that survey, and that informs policy. And at the Exim Bank, we execute the policy. And, it's similar. When you talk about the cashless society, it's similar. You can talk about it from a retail level and then at a wholesale level. So right now, the Exim Bank is kind of at the wholesale level.
Okay.
We are actually, I can't call a specific name due to client confidentiality. There are many of these companies that are on the floor here today are our clients. One of our biggest mandates is to make sure and bring in facilitated payments for basic foods and medicines into the country to ensure we don't have any shortages. So we are dealing with many of these clients, but we don't accept cash, right? At that, we are dealing with all electronic transfers and international wire transfers and SWIFT and so on. So at that level, the companies are completely electronic based. And then at the distribution level, again, is all done electronic basis. That's at that what you call the last mile, or at the retail level. That's where the drive to push to a cashless, or more cash, less society is important. And I think John and his team are doing a lot of good work. Yesterday, I heard him in a conference talk about some of the deliverables that him and his team have been able to accomplish. And I think we're definitely moving in a very good direction.
And how does this affect the consumer who is playing catch up when it comes to being part of the cashless society?
I wouldn't use the word affect, but I would use the word enhance the consumer experience. Because I want to give a couple of examples, and these are things that we have been working particularly with the financial sector and international players such as the Visas and the MasterCards, right? And these are some things the consumers themselves, and again, going back to what I would call the retail side, particularly on the food industry, restaurant, supermarkets. Now, 50% of businesses in Trinidad and Tobago have what they will call tap and pay acceptance, where you can take your card and tap and pay. This is the highest penetration of that technology in the Caribbean. The reason why that technology was adopted wasn't just to be gimmicky, where I could take out my card and tap and, oh, nice. When you think about what used to happen in the industry before, you would go to a restaurant, you have a nice meal, right? You have good conversation. You might probably be on a date. You give the waitress or the waiter your card. They go to the back, they swipe it, they bring back the bill. By the time you're driving home and say, let's go and get some ice cream, you might get a call from the bank to say, did you buy a jet ski in Cuba? Because again, your card details or your card might have gotten skimmed. So when you think about what tap and pay is, the card never leaves the consumer's hands. It is never exchanged with the other person to do the transaction. I do put in the card and then the person takes the information and looks at the PIN. The card never leaves your hand. And the speed at which it happens is instantaneously. It is even quicker than paying with cash. Because you tap, you pay, and you move on. If you think about it with cash, you have to tender cash, the person has to open the drawer, they have to take out change. So when you look at that as a simple example in terms of the efficiency, in terms of this cashless drive, how that could impact. So what we're trying to do now is, even with that sort of drive, is to take those same capabilities and embed it into government.
Okay.
But also now, when you have to go and pay, for example, at a government institution, be able to use those technologies. But the first order of business, what we're trying to do is to not have people go to a government office, be able to do business online. So to make payments for your government services via your online debit card now, which is, we just realized recently, all the commercial banks have now switched out what you would call the traditional links cards to these Visa-enabled debit cards. What a lot of people aren't aware of, and these are the things we have to start to communicate, is you can use that local debit card to do online commerce with local merchants. So I could, for example, go to an online marketplace, which you have a number of them, which support, like for TSCT and their Parlor marketplace. It supports a lot of persons within the cottage industry, in the creative sector. I can now use that card and make payments and buy those crafts and so forth, because before you could only use your credit cards, So there's a lot of what I would say foundational work that has provided a good platform to sort of move Trinidad in that direction, but now the communication is how, and that's what the survey is kind of helping us to inform, what are the sectors we need to start with, how we need to communicate, but more importantly, what are the real barriers that we need to overcome.
And I don't know if you have the data just yet on the food and beverage industry, and I'm wondering how this affects policy, especially with Exim Bank.
Yeah.
Who is initiating the policy, and how is that being taken into consideration for the execution?
Okay, let me get to that about the policy and the execution. But first, let's just jump off John's point. So we have a lot of solutions in the market now. Exim Bank, our role is to complement the banking sector. I'm going to plug a particular bank here, right? But just to let people know, so we complement the banking sector. So I have no problem talking about this bank. But in different parts of India and Africa, they already have these barcodes that people, when you're buying stuff at the market,
Yes.
right, and just small vendors and so on, you could just scan this barcode and pay. Well, I don't know if many people know, but it's been advertised a lot on TV. Republic Bank has delivered the Encash app and solution, which is exactly that. And so we are ready in Trinidad and Tobago have that ability to scan now. They're trying to, they're taking some time to get the adoption and engagement. It's new. Anything that is new in a society sometimes takes a little while to get traction. But it's something that's worked all over the world, and we have it here already, right? So it's something that will probably be driven into different parts of transactions at the market, at the food stalls, at your, I'm Eddie Hat food court, right, for me, and those type of things. So it's in the market. You talked about policy and execution. So policy is set by the government, right? And sometimes it's driven based on legislation that is passed by Parliament. Sometimes there are things that don't necessarily need parliamentary approval, and the government can put things in motion with basically a government policy. Then it comes to state enterprises and other ministries to execute on the policy. The Exim Bank is one state enterprise. TTIFC, International Finance Center, is another state enterprise. Right. So this is where we are driving some of those policy initiatives forward.
Right, and you seem to be very passionate about it. Many solutions are already in place. I'd like to touch on some, like for an example, food drop, if you could explain for those in the food and beverage industry who may have heard about it but not too sure exactly how these solutions work.
Yeah, sure. And even as Navin was speaking, I was actually just kind of looking around because, Navin was commenting, even in this first year for this conference, this entire facility is basically full with a lot of vendors. And in my mind, I was just thinking, if I wanted to buy a couple of things to come out here, but I don't have enough cash, that would limit me in terms of the amount of trade.
Right.
And then when we think about it, all of these establishments could accept payments from persons with a phone or through a card, but again, is how do we communicate the acceptance and then the adoption, because if you think about it, having these cashless solutions increases trade because you're limited. Nobody walks around with a lot of cash anymore, Me personally, I guess from where I'm at in my rule now in the IFC, I am forbidden to carry cash, even if I wanted to, right? Because how we could have the man who driving cashless walk around with a set of cash, right? So, it really helps to kind of push and improve trade. And if you use Food Drop, for example, as Navin mentioned, we were in a conference yesterday, and we were talking with one of the founders of Food Drop, and their business started 2 months before the pandemic came on, right? And they intentionally, their business model was, we want to solve a pain point when it comes to food, right? Persons want to be able to get something to eat, but not necessarily have to go and drive and line up and park and all those things. So we just simply want to provide a delivery service. So all we need to do is to get restaurants on board, get them to use our technology, and then we will find the customers and create that marketplace. And what they found was because of the pandemic, it forced them to say, well, we will only deal with cashless. We will not deliver food and accept cash on premises. Because when you think about the pandemic, there was a lot of misconceptions of how the virus was spreading. And you heard a lot of stories. I saw a lot of businessmen would, could attest to taking the cash that they get and putting it in a bucket of bleach and hanging it up to dry, right? Because they didn't want the cash was being handled, and stuff. So they had to go cashless So they basically started to do, and as I said, the first couple months of the pandemic, their throughput skyrocketed. They were doing something like, you know, a couple thousand transactions a day in terms of delivering. And then they started to expand into the supermarket area because they now started to develop something called pantry, where people didn't want to go to the grocery, where I could use the food drop app, order the groceries I needed, and get it delivered guaranteed the next morning by 9 o'clock. Now, when I thought about the service, I know a lot of people, for example, would say, I would just use that service alone to order bottled water because nobody likes to take bottled water out of their car and carry it upstairs, right? It's just an inconvenience. So they were delivering that. I mean, think about it before that, you know, people who tried to do online groceries and so forth, they had a limited amount of success. There was a company called Hubbox, but, you know, I think Food Drop in terms of focusing on the retail sector and then kind of pivoting now into the grocery sector, and that seems to be going well. You know, they have, I think, creating a trend where now you have a couple more food apps, such as We Eat, that is also operating, and then Skip the Line, I know, and operate. So probably about 4 or 5 of these companies that just came up right through the pandemic, you know, and this is where we start to talk about how you see the digital economy now becoming prevalent in Trinidad, because when you look at the supply chain for an app like this is, you have people who are being employed who are monitoring the transactions. You now have people who are basically doing what we call a side hustle in Trinidad, who need to do the deliveries so they can switch on the app, go and do some food drop deliveries, make extra income. You have people now in terms of from the finance side who do any e-commerce and the software development and so forth. So, you know, when you create these sort of services, it really creating what I would call a whole new industry that wasn't there in Trinidad and Tobago, meaning that what we call the gig economy. I could put on my phone and put on an app and make money, you know, and just tap into an industry, you know. And these are the things that, you know, myself and Nava have been speaking about because, you know, while the Exim Bank is focusing on the manufacturing sector, which is very, very good and is doing very, very well, particularly with the intervention of the Exim Bank, there are other sectors that I think have a lot of growth opportunity and potential. So how do we develop programs to invest in those entrepreneurs who put in their capital at risk and doing what I call these sort of human services? Because, you know, I'm sure, Samantha, you have used Food Drop a couple times, you know, when you're not feeling to get out or it's raining, you know. So it really does, you know, kind of move the whole ecosystem.
And when it comes to, we might say, competition spaces, marketplaces such as Amazon, that for a long time was taking a lot of our foreign exchange away from the country. Using the cashless systems locally, does that enhance or make US dollars more available to local manufacturers and manufacturers?
Because it's a local transaction, it doesn't directly, but if they use it to purchase locally manufactured goods, it's an import substitution mechanism there. And so again, many of the manufacturers here, one of the things that the Exim Bank is doing is because foreign currency is limited, and when they have to expand and buy equipment, it all comes from away, and it costs US dollars. And so what we do is we provide TT dollar loans. It's called an X loan, so they could pay back in TT with their local currency, but they get US currency that, well, it goes straight directly to the supplier for the equipment. So, you know, it's something that we've facilitated. It's helped a lot of manufacturers actually grow and expand and increase the exports, which then increase foreign exchange earnings as well.
So another solution there being provided.
Yeah, that's right. And Samantha, I don't want to jump ahead, but I want you to just ask him a little bit about that Fintech association that he is championing, because I think it's a...
I thought Samantha doing the interview. You take over?
Well, sorry, it's just something, I feel so important. That
No, definitely, if it's important, it needs to be stressed.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and, you know, as Navin was speaking, even coming into here, you know, a lot of the brands that I would have seen in supermarkets, I automatically, because of the quality of the packaging and the way they present themselves, I always thought those foreign brands, but I realized there's local brands, you know. And, you know, when we're thinking about it, as going back to the example of Food Drop, they're now looking to expand into the Caribbean, because a lot of the time when you go to Caribbean islands, you see a lot of TT products. I just wanted, before I talk about the Fintech Association, I'll give an example. There was a very popular show on HBO called Succession. I don't know if you had heard about it. And in the last episode, they were filming in Barbados, in a very, very exotic place. But when one of the characters opened the fridge, it had a bunch of LLB in the fridge and some Zoomers and thing, and I was like, wait, look, this is, Angostura, so you're seeing the pervasiveness and, how these things can kind of cut into, and what we're trying to do in terms of like how you have the Manufacturers Association and you have different supermarket association, which are really established to promote a sector and industry and promote the members of that industry. The TTIC, we started at the Fintech TT Association about 2 years ago, and the idea is the same thing where players and members of this industry could now consolidate, aggregate, come up with initiatives, ideas, do these sort of expos and so on, and really promote that sector. And in the short space of time it has been around, they have over 75 members. And you wouldn't even know that we have all of this innovation. You have all these people doing things here in TT. So it really provides a perspective. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of industry taking place in Trinidad and Tobago, but it's very, very nascent. And I think from both our areas, what we're trying to do is to really, because I'm very impressed like what Navin has been doing with the manufacturing sector, because you have never seen. I think before Navin, you didn't even know what the Exim Bank used to do. I just thought it was part of the first 7. So I think is the continuous promotion and getting persons involved, I think is really going to do well.
And I really enjoyed this conversation, gentlemen. It's making me feel a lot more secure about a cashless society and moving forward. Any parting words as we wrap up on fintech and digital currency as related to the food and beverage industry?
Yeah, sure. I mean, parting words for me is that, I think there's a lot of promise for this particular vision set forth by the government in terms of promoting cashless. The biggest challenge that we have right now, I would say, is education and awareness. Because as I just mentioned, some people will have their own inhibitions about using cash, but then, simple financial literacy, which, Samantha, going into the insurance industry, you would understand, having proper documentation or being able to, set up a standing order or having online banking and all these little things to kind of make the process easier. We're still seeing a lot of challenges. People still line up outside banks, credit unions to do business, So I think that education and awareness is key, and that is one of the key things that we are looking to focus on, going forward and later into the year.
Thank you so much, John.
And well, Samantha, I think John covered, the meat of this very, very well. So I just want to end by commending yourself, the Supermarkets Association, Southex, for putting on this show. As we said, we can't believe this whole hall is filled on the first go around.
Yes.
And so that is very, very impressive. And the fact that you guys are driving the conversation, you are asking the type of questions that are getting people to think and to move us all forward in our own minds of what is coming next on a number of fronts, not just fintech. I've heard just the health discussion and nutrition and so on before, and I'm sure across the agenda, you've been touching on a lot of different points, and I think that there is really helping in moving the agenda forward. Hopefully in a few years, when we get here into this conference, we'll be seeing the QR codes to scan, to pay, or at least terminals to tap and go.
Cashless experience in the Supermarket Association next year, for sure.
Yeah.
It sounds great.
We're happy to contribute, and thank you for having us here, Samantha.
And thank you for making the time. I know you two are very busy, so we do appreciate your presence very much. Mr. Navin Dukaran, John Outridge, here at the Caribbean Food and Beverage Event 2023 at the Center of Excellence, as we wrapped up a discussion on fintech and digital currency. Again, we are streaming live on Southex's YouTube channel, and we are being broadcast live on Freedom 106.5 FM.